Today, we will be going over Omnia. Had to tell you this in case you clicked on this video without reading the title, I guess. But before I do that, it would make the most sense if I introduced you to the person who will be joining me on this journey through commentary hell. The Virgil to my Dante, if you will. They should have been here by now, but they said their train is running late.
Hey, Aja.
Wait, who are you?
I'm Lin Lin. You know, that kid that clowned on Shannon with you that one time?
Oh yeah! Wait, why are you so late?
Yeah, sorry about that. My train got delayed to a nauseating level after someone tried to throw my credibility onto the track, only for me to throw theirs on instead.
Well, that's cringe.
Indeed. But you said that you wanted some help from an insider in relation to Omnia?
Indeed.
Alright then, boss. I'll let you take the reins first, and we can go in depth with some of my stuff in a bit. You start with a bit of context for this shitstorm.
Where do we begin? Omnia can be best described as someone who has created a whirlpool of drama around themselves with countless people. Throughout their time, going against many people across the spectrum, people who were in the wrong, like Creepshow Art, or Kai Weiss, and other people who weren't in the wrong as much, like Hopeless Peaches, and some that fall between, like Tobi. Keep in mind, they're not solely responsible for any of these dramas at all. However, the fact that they keep showing up in the wrong place makes you think after a while.
While it's not an issue on its own, it seems like it would be inevitable for someone who hung around people like these to have slipped up in a few ways, and unfortunately, that has in fact been the case.
And that is why we nerds are here, to go into depth with some of the situations that Omnia has had direct involvement in. After all of these dramas, Omnia would get away relatively unscathed, but as these dramas started to mount up, people would start to look at them with more and more of a critical eye. Even though there were problems with Omnia from the beginning, that ended up being ignored by most of the audience. So let's start from the very beginning.
It's rewind time.
From the situation that would thrust Omnia into the limelight as a commentator. A situation that involved an artist known by many names, but we will be referring to them as Dollieguts. This was a situation where people were taking issue with how she portrayed her OC, which was loosely based off herself, but the problems people had with it in retrospect really weren't big deals. People were just making mountains out of molehills.
This was a situation that was later covered by Ponder Sprocket in 2 videos that would go over the videos that started the situation. But the issue here would be the way that Omnia would lend their voice and their platform to some of the claims made against Dollieguts, providing their voice and platform to takes that, to put it simply, don't really hold all too much water. The first of these would be how Dollieguts presented their OC, known as Ash, to have a variety of mental disorders.
Tirza assigns an array of mental illnesses onto Ash, including Asperger's, bipolar type schizoaffective disorder, borderline personality disorder, level 10 misophonia, dermatophagia, dermatillomania, body dysmorphia, suffering from memory loss, violent dissociative episodes, and a history of self-harm.
But who cares? People with mental disorders fucking exist, and having a character that has them is not a problem. And even if they weren't portrayed in the most medical accurate way, proving it was done out of malice intent is what you would need to do. That is, if you wanted to hold it against someone.
Not to mention how Dollieguts had made it known that the Ash character was basically an artistic rendition of themselves, and to put it bluntly, it makes you come off as a bit of a gatekeeper to try to tell people what they can and can't do with their characters, especially when said character was one that was incredibly important to their artist.
Another problem that Omnia seemed to have with Dollieguts was how they portrayed Ash in a way that some could see as young.
She said she was 12!
And Ash was also a character who canonically worked as a escort.
To hooking with men for such compensation, which left them miserable. The second problematic thing about Ash is that Tirza continually depicts them as insanely small. I'm talking 4 feet 6 inches type of small.
This is a claim that you would think is pretty cut and dry, right? Well, not really. that argument does have a pretty noticeable flaw, because the art style that depicts them is a little thing known as chibi art. You might have heard of it. A character having a sexual job doesn't mean drawing art of them in a way that depicts them as young or small is a problem. If that were the case, you would also need to argue against the idea that chibi art of characters like Lust from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood or Veronica Mayday from Hell of a Boss are depictions of CP. To put it lightly, that idea is pretty stupid.
Especially when you consider how the doll version of the character in question actually doesn't even have... So if this was done to sexualize children, the only thing that would make this an issue, then why would that have been done? It just doesn't make sense. Unless you realize that this wasn't done for the sake of doing that and was instead likely done to present themes of innocence in the pieces that have Dollieguts' character take this form. And from here, there really isn't much more that we can go into without very harshly towing the line of going over very sensitive issues that don't really do much more than prove the point that the last two arguments we presented do. So to summarize, Omnia's rise to fame in the commentary community occurred because of how they would lend their platform to claims that were shoddy at best, because when you hold them to the littlest of scrutiny, they don't really hold much more structural integrity than a house of cards.
But the story doesn't end there, folks. Omnia would keep making content and would keep gaining influence in the commentary community. But one day they would get a big spike of attention from a little drama you might have heard of, a Tobi drama. Given how both Kai and Omnia were collaborating a lot in the situation we're about to cover here, it's hard to tell which of the two was most responsible for what was said.
However, given how they could have raised the argument against a given statement if there was a disagreement between the two, you can't really pin all the blame for a given argument onto one party, given how this was a collaborative effort that we can with reason assume had a script, and even if it didn't, the invalid arguments could have just been cut, so that's beside the point. Either way, this segment is going to be going over the Tobi drama.
But wait, Lin Lin, isn't the drama long dead by now? You are just beating a dead horse to revive the drama.
Okay, that is frankly the most nothing argument I have ever heard, that does absolutely nothing to contribute to a given conversation and merely deflects from it instead. A drama being dead does not mean that a given argument about it is invalidated, so if your statement does not actually engage with the conversation and instead simply seeks to dismiss it, that would suggest that you know that your ideals about a given conversation do not hold much water after being challenged, and you should frankly shut up. Anyways, the Tobi drama was one of the most impactful dramas on the commentary community in recent memory. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the events of it, I have made a video discussing it on my channel that you can check out if you need to be caught up to speed. But either way, this was a situation that heavily involved Omnia and certainly gives us a lot to talk about in terms of their misactions. So let's start from the beginning here, back at the first video that Omnia made regarding the situation.
One thing both Kai and Omnia were very good at during their time in the commentary community was pulling the race card, while doing it in a way that would make it hard for most people to notice. The first thing we will cover regarding the Tobi drama was an incident where Omnia did just that. One of the biggest arguments that Omnia had in their first video on Tobi was calling Tobi a performative activist who did not truly support the Black Lives Matter movement, despite publicly showing support for it.
The part that I'm more interested in about Tobi's pitfalls lies with her performative activism, as well as her inability to properly accept and receive criticism.
Ask yourself this. What kind of person pops into the head of most people when they hear about someone who doesn't support BLM? A racist. Yes, this argument isn't directly making the claim that Tobi is racist, but the argument is constructed in a way that would indirectly lead a viewer to come to the conclusion on their own. When Omnia and Kai were both interviewed together by Spoctor for his video on the situation, Kai claimed that no one was called directly racist in the drama.
Me, Thuman, Omnia, none of us at all ever said that anybody was racist. Yeah,
No,
never once did I call any of these people racist.
Yeah, I can't say that she's a performative activist or anything. Her wording was poor. Like, that's it.
While that may be true, they do not need to claim that anyone was racist in order to give the audience the idea that Tobi was racist.
You may be thinking, isn't racism a perfectly valid thing to call out? Yes, it is. Just as long as you are able to substantiate that the person you are calling racist is actually racist. Otherwise, you are setting the precedent that calling someone racist, or implying that someone is racist, I guess, without substantial evidence is okay. And frankly, setting a precedent that would turn false allegations into a weapon that is hard to counter is a very dangerous thing to do, but whatever. Because what was the evidence that Omnia decided to use to back up their claim? Tobi supporting Shane Dawson.
Shane has done some really terrible racist things over the course of his career on YouTube, which has mostly been written off as quote-unquote jokes over the course of his career as a creator on this platform. Shane has said the N-word multiple times and dressed in blackface more times than he has done makeup looks, which is disappointing to say the least. When you assume someone, such as Tobi, who is so vocal about being pro-black life, be against a creator like Shane, who has perpetuated negative stereotypes of black folks so frequently, apparently not.
I am not here to say that any of the shit that Shane has done was acceptable. It was pretty repulsive and tasteless as far as I'm concerned. However, claiming that Tobi is lying about supporting BLM because of supporting Shane at the same time is about as flimsy as the story of Halo 5. Because someone is able to support someone that has done some pretty dodgy things without supporting them doing said dodgy things. Supporting Shane and supporting BLM are not mutually exclusive concepts from each other, so you can't exactly say that Tobi is pretending to support BLM just because she supports Shane.
But the drama didn't stay on YouTube for very long. It ended up being taken to Twitter not too long afterwards. Omnia saw Madlibs making a vague subtweet that mentioned that she wanted to cover someone on her channel, despite the fact that she normally doesn't do that. Omnia would jump to the conclusion that this subtweet was about them. Not only was there nothing to support such an absurd accusation, but it would turn out not to be the case, after Kai joined in to go off on Madlibs as well.
Madlibs Art, who had absolutely nothing to do with the situation, decided it would be a good idea to vague tweet Omnia. But before I get into that, I want to be 100% transparent and say that Omnia and I both made a miscommunication in this subtweet that Libby made about Z Fix's art. Omnia assumed that it was about her and replied, and I went on to defend her as well. Nezzy Monster, who I'll get into in a moment, as well as Libby, soon clarified that this tweet wasn't about Omnia. Neither was Libby's upcoming video. That's our bad. We made a lapse in judgment.
How egocentric do you have to be? You saw that someone wanted to make a critical video and immediately thought it was about you. And in terms of Madlibs, while the stuff on Twitter that we are covering does end there, things that relate to Libby didn't. After Tobi had released her response to the drama at that point, Omnia's response to Tobi's response had a clip near the end that went a little like this.
Right now, I'm speaking to Madlibs Art and whoever else you're collaborating with on this supposed video y'all are making. Unless you're looking to end up like your little friend right here, just don't do it. You already look bad for getting yourself involved for no reason other than to do Tobi's dirty work. So just spare yourself the time and the inevitable tank in subscribers and just make some other video.
Why would you do that? What is gained from indirectly trying to hush the other side of the argument in a way that is unnecessarily confrontational, attempting to get the other side of the debate to shut up instead of allowing them to make their case and maturely responding to their points isn't how you debate. It is how you avoid your views getting challenged.
And at this point, that should be all from the Tobi drama that needs to be covered, as it has ultimately been covered in depth in other places by other people at this point. So we will now move into talking about another drama that Omnia would be heavily involved in, the Hopeless Peaches situation. To give a bit of context, near the end of the Tobi drama, prison mate Luke would bring very serious claims to Hopeless Peaches given how she was involved, albeit to a very minor degree.
And while we are not here to talk about Luke, you can go watch some of my other videos that debunk the claims he made about Peaches.
This is a topic that has ultimately been covered to death, and it goes over some quite sensitive themes when doing so. But to give a little TLDR, Omnia's involvement in the Peaches drama was something that took a situation that was already awful and simply made it worse. Especially given how long it took for them to just swallow their pride and actually correct the mistakes, like the use of Peaches' grooming thumbnail in their own thumbnail. And at that point, it seems that this drama has been covered in depth by Jar enough at this point to effectively leave it at that. And on that note, I think it's time to move into a little something that actually no one has been publicly informed about just yet, so hold on to your hats.
Editor's note for Lin Lin. I brought this up a few times before, but a few of you might remember the Creepshow Art situation. I left a comment underneath Emily Artful's video, saying that Creepshow Art hurt me, and my friends as well. Omnia left this lovely tweet about it, saying I was making Emily Artful's video all about myself, and my comment was only for clout. I can't even leave a comment without having Omnia harass me. Omnia's most recent controversy that they found themselves in was that they traced someone else's artwork without properly crediting them. It's not that big of a deal for me, but knowing the art commentary community, they really have a problem with tracing, so yeah, the art commentary community had a huge problem with Omnia's video. Kai talked about it, a bunch of other small commentators talked about it. Peach's video on it nearly got 100,000 views at the time of me recording this. I thought the only issue was that she traced art and deleted comments of people trying to talk about it. But man, were there way more problems with this video than I once thought. Like her saying you shouldn't be invested in the Creepshow Art drama, and also telling people to check out her Creepshow Art series. Talking about the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case without actually knowing what it was about, and siding with Amber Heard a lot more than Johnny, and well, I also haven't followed the case. Most people I have talked to said that Johnny did some things bad, but Amber Heard is much more clearly in the wrong. The only thing I know is that leaked audio of Amber saying, "Johnny, I wasn't punching you, I was hitting you," or at least something along those lines. But this video is already going to be a half an hour long by the time it comes out, so I recommend you just check out Peach's video on the subject. She goes over basically everything. And this part is something that Lin Lin wanted to cover on her own, as it is a situation that she was directly involved with. So you take it from here, Lin. I'll go get some propane or something, and you can have the floor.
Cheers, Jar. So this situation was one that personally opened my eyes in terms of how Omnia operates. For those who don't know, I had been friends with Omnia for a good while, and that had unfortunately come to an end a few months ago. Now, that on its own isn't an issue. People leave friends behind all the time, I get that. But the problem with it is that Omnia had relayed the list of reasons for this decision to a former friend of mine, and looking at them shows a lot about them if this is the reason that they have for cutting off a friend. Something that showcases that Omnia's attitudes in terms of disagreements with people are not something that they leave to YouTube alone, and is also causing them to want to never interact with a good friend ever again. Cue the list. Nia has their own reasons as to why they don't feel comfortable interacting with you. I'll try and explain the big ones. You hang out with people who have hurt Nia in the past, such as Peaches, Jar, and Harley, despite claiming to be their kid. They feel like you only use them for clout, like when you ask them to shout you out and to be named their successor. Some people in the server feel like you downplayed Jar's involvement in the Tobi drama and never stated any of the criticisms to Nia's face. Your reply to the Thumin is vacationing in South Korea tweet was the straw that broke the camel's back. They felt like your reply was accusing them of something, like the tweet would somehow put Thumin's life in danger. Thumin is fine with the tweet, so Nia felt that that was a truly bizarre response from you, and decided that it would be better for them to not interact with you. So there is a hefty lot to unpack here, so let's take things point by point. Firstly, taking issue with the way that I considered Harley, Jar, and Peaches to be good friends. And I don't really have much more to say than the fact that I am allowed to be friends with someone who you have problems with, especially given how it is possible to be friends with someone without agreeing with them on everything ever. So I struggle to see why you should throw someone away like this just for liking someone you don't. It is possible to be friends with people who you don't agree with on everything, and the fact that I consider both Thumin and Jar friends should be evident to that. So the fact that Omnia sees that I like people that they don't, and they don't even try to ask me on what I agree with them on in terms of them, is bothersome. It frankly annoys me that this basic logic of a friendship has to be coming from the autistic kid with no friends and not the adult of the situation. But it bothers me that you see that I am friends with people who disagree with you, and not only do you see that as something that points to the idea that I was pretending to be your friend, but you never even asked me about what I agreed with these people on. So even if we do by the idea that you are as much of a victim in relation to these people as you seem to think you are, that still doesn't account for the fact that you don't even care to communicate with me about what I agreed with Jar, Harley, and Peaches on. For all you knew at this point in the timeline, I could have disagreed with these people on everything that they had ever done relating to you, but you not only completely robbed me of the question, but you took the least charitable interpretation you could and seemed to have constructed a delusional image of who I am around that. And just to better illustrate the fact that this kind of thing is so beyond asinine, let's take this line of logic and turn it back on Omnia themselves for a second. Because if Omnia thinks that constructing an image of someone around the least charitable interpretation possible is okay, then how about we see where it leads us if we do that with them for a second? Because don't you think that it's pretty convenient that Omnia would cut me off not too long after I had effectively buried Kai 6 feet under? I suppose you kept me around for as long as you needed me until I had served my purpose and took your ex down for you. Not to mention that Omnia was the one to provide me with the Discord tag I needed to be able to reach out to prison mate Luke for my video about him, which could suggest that these two are or were friends to some degree. And to follow Omnia's logic that you need to agree with everything that someone does in order to be friends with someone, that would suggest that Omnia would agree with a lot of the actions taken by Luke that are outlined in the videos that me, Jar, and countless others have made about him up until this point. Now, do I think that all of this is the reality? No, because I have common sense. However, this is just to better illustrate the fact that taking a massive leap in logic like this to construct an image of someone around that is underhanded to say the least, as it does absolutely nothing to assist in a constructive conversation at all, and instead does the exact opposite. It brands someone as having a core set of values that this argument doesn't even substantiate, so that you can avoid having to actually confront someone's arguments properly. Which leads us to Omnia calling me a clout chaser who just used them to get attention when I would call myself their successor. When, like, no. That was a meme I liked to make based on a time when you had said that I was literally your child in your words, and I rolled with the meme that I would succeed you in your position in the YouTube commentary community because I thought that it was funny. And yet, you apparently see this as an example of me trying to leech fame off you? I'm sorry, but that just doesn't make any sense to me. Because not only does your example not even do anything to substantiate the hypothesis that you give, but the argument itself makes no sense either. And to best illustrate that, let's put ourselves into the perspective of who Omnia thinks I am for a second here. According to Omnia, I was just being their friend because of the fact that they have a significantly more sizable platform than I do. However, if I was someone who was only around Omnia for clout, why on earth would I stick by Omnia during the time that they were being called out for supposedly exploiting the legal system to steal Kai Weiss's cat? I'll set the scene of the situation here. After parts of the legal proceedings between Omnia and Kai, Omnia would be granted full legal ownership of the cat that Kai had shown to have owned even before the two were together. This would put a lot more of a skeptical eye onto Omnia at the time, as they were branded to have abused the legal proceedings to steal Kai's pet. And despite that at this stage, being associated with Omnia could have dealt damage to my public reputation in theory, I stuck by them because while we do know that Kai owned the cat before the relationship, there simply is not enough public evidence as to what went wrong during the relationship that caused those looking over the case to side with Omnia and give them ownership of the cat. As far as I'm concerned, there is simply too many possible unknown variables that could be at play here, and I therefore stuck by Omnia, and even kept the neotology meme in my Twitter bio after a point that I was questioned about why I was supporting a cat stealer. To put a long story short, someone who was just around Omnia for clout would have seen the fact that being associated with them eventually did more bad than good for their reputation, as calling myself Omnia's succession clearly didn't make me a celebrity now, did it? And would have left Omnia and publicly disavowed them for all that they had done in the eyes of the common consensus at this point. And even though I stuck by Omnia when it would only do me harm in the eyes of onlookers of the situation, I was only their friend for clout's sake according to them. And all I have to say to that argument at this point is that it's based on the worst possible interpretation of events, despite the fact that we have evidence to suggest the opposite to be the case that Omnia seems to completely ignore, as it is contrarian to what they believe to be the case. And that is why this line of reasoning for Omnia cutting me off bothers me as much as it does. They take a conclusion, skew whatever they can to fit their own preconceived narrative, and then just completely disregard an example that suggests against what they're claiming. It's lying by omission at the most literal sense of the word. And to add on to that, I was going through my old tweets at one point and I actually found something quite interesting. This tweet I made in support of Omnia. Why does this tweet bear any relevance to the conversation, you may ask? Well, because of the date that the tweet had been made. Given that it's Omnia's claim that I was friends with them just for the sake of clout, that would only make sense if I was also bigging up Omnia publicly as well. After all, how are you supposed to get clout off of a private friendship? However, the earliest instance of supporting Omnia on my Twitter that I could find was released on the 28th of September 2021. A date that, for those of you who don't know, was before I even had my YouTube channel. So honestly, it really bugs me for Omnia to claim that I was only being friends with them for clout when supporting them publicly, the part of that relationship that actually could impact my standings online, was something that I did even before I had a platform to utilize said clout. And not only that, but this would have shown me all the way back in September of 2021 that supporting someone alone doesn't make a fan base, so why would I keep doing that all the way into 2022? Well, I'll tell you. It's because this interpretation is so frankly beyond ridiculous that using it to cut someone off who you considered a friend doesn't make much sense. Well, that is of course unless you were pretending to be my friend, but I do doubt that. In addition to this list tries to say that I was a clout chaser because of asking Omnia for a shout out. Given how overly vague this is, it doesn't actually say which of the two possible instances of this that it's talking about, so that's why I'm going to be addressing both of them. The first of which would be a time when I asked Omnia to react to my Creep Show art video on stream, and the reason that I had done this was because of a little message that I put at the end of the video. Fourth is thank you to Omnia and their Twitch chat. We PogChamps at Neotology are the best chat on Twitch hands down, so come vibe with us sometime. Basically, the reason I had asked Nia to show that on stream was because I wanted them to know that I supported them and the other members of their circle in a way that would also provide feedback from someone in the community that I had a lot of respect for and that had a lot more experience than I did. It wasn't a move specifically made for the sake of attention at all, and the fact that this unneededly uncharitable interpretation is drawn upon for no reason bugs me. But it doesn't bother me as much as the other possible instance that the list could be referring to, which is the case where I had asked Omnia if they would be able to help spread the message about when NSFW artists were creating lewd images of my character. And to put things bluntly, if you think that a situation where I was effectively begging you on my knees to help in a situation that was pretty fucking traumatic to me was done for the sake of attention, then it seems like you were really scraping at the bottom of the barrel to find something to hold against me. Even a situation where I was desperate, in a situation where I had felt completely helpless and hoped that you would be able to lend your platform to voice the fact that what was happening to me and countless others was disgusting. And that isn't even taking into account how the list of complaints features the idea that I downplayed Jar's involvement in my video covering the Tobi drama. And this is the moment where I don't have much more to say beyond the fact that this is just a bald-faced lie now. And this is apparent due to how I stated multiple times throughout the video that the point of me making it was to point out the fact that, in my opinion, everyone who got involved in the Tobi drama to any significant degree handled it just as badly as the others did. So allow me to tell the tale of an overly drawn out drama that had a record-breaking 0 people in the right. In a situation so populated as this, where almost everyone was screwing up in at least some way, getting even more people involved just isn't gonna get us anywhere. After going over this drama one final time, it had been made clear to me that the counter people who were in the right during this drama that changed YouTube commentary forever all the way through was absolutely none of them. And I am sick to death of people looking back on the drama thinking that it was a black and white situation, despite the fact that it just isn't if you take 1 second to take off the Stan goggles for any given side and realize that the creators that both you and I love screwed up too. And what makes this drama so fascinating for me is that it was able to change the commentary community so much while having absolutely no major player who was objectively in the right all the way through. My video did all it could to put everyone on equal footing because no one involved in that drama was anything close to perfect as far as I'm concerned. Everyone on both sides of the fence had at least one problem that I would be able to point out somewhere. Even the individuals that ended up being removed from the final cut of the video to eliminate me repeating myself, like Prismate Luke and Norny. TLDR, to say that I was downplaying the involvement of anyone in that video, Jar or otherwise, is nothing short of dishonest. As in order to make such an argument work, you would need to go out of your way to ignore what the point of the video existing is, and I struggle to see why you would do that if you were coming to my video to look at it objectively, like the mature adult that you have no excuse not to be, and I really thought you were, Omnia. Then we get to mentioning that I didn't mention the points in my Tobi video to Omnia's face. And while this point is certainly the strongest one, it is also pretty flawed when you consider how old the Tobi drama is at this point. Given how my video was more focused on serving as a documentary piece of sorts, the points in my video, especially the ones that were brought to Omnia, were points that I have a hard time believing that they haven't heard before. I can see where you're coming from in the sense that I could have mentioned these points directly to you beforehand, but at the end of the day, I have a hard time seeing what kind of constructive conversation that it would lead to, given how they were arguments that I highly doubt that you hadn't already made up your mind on if you agree with them or not. And before anyone wants to say that the message containing these complaints words it as people in the server think for these 2 points, while that is the case, that doesn't make mentioning it invalid for 2 reasons. Firstly, if you want to cut someone off because of what other people think about them, then you clearly don't seem to value that person all that much at all, do you? And secondly, following the ideal that Omnia needs to have in order to make cutting me off because of what my friends think a valid argument, that would suggest that either Omnia agrees with the server on these points, or they are only around them for clout, which is a pretty dumb argument. So long story short, you don't get to pick and choose instead of sticking to your principles. And finally reaching the end of the list with the points regarding a tweet Thuman made about being in South Korea on holiday. At this point, I must say that my recollection of events is pretty shaky here because the original tweet in question has since been taken down, and I wasn't able to find it anywhere. But to put a long story short, that was a tweet that Thuman had made about being on holiday in South Korea, and I had replied to it rather confused because I didn't know what was going on at the time, and I was probably reading the tweet wrong as well, knowing me. Basically, my reply wasn't accusing anyone of anything at all, and claiming that this was the straw that broke the camel's back confuses me because with me not taking the issues with your involvement in the Tobi drama to you directly, while I certainly don't agree that it was as much of a problem as you seem to think, at least we can both agree that that actually happened. And here's another editor's note of something that has been brought to my attention. After I was going over this part of the video with a few friends, one of them had pointed out that they were able to find the tweet that I was referencing here. Although seeing it, it seemed to raise just as many questions as it did answers, as I still can't really see how this comes across as accusatory in any way, or for that matter, anything beyond confused. And with that, this message was the last thing I ever heard from Omnia, at which point I think that perhaps this was for the best. Given how much this situation has been mentally shattering to me, it is more than likely a good thing that I am no longer friends with Omnia today. Someone who would throw me away with the drop of a hat as I would hint towards the idea that they may have been wrong about something. Someone who pretended to value me as a friend whenever we were in course together, and yet they are willing to spit in the face of other ideals that they would seem to have in order to never again interact, in their words not mine, with someone who went against the idea that they were a saint. And after points were made on my platform that despite giving you as much benefit of doubt as I possibly could, acknowledged that you'd done a very natural and forgivable thing called making a mistake, you decided that throwing me out was the most convenient option for you, and you did so without so much as directly telling me what the problem was yourself. And given how you want to sit up there on your high pedestal of a community that is built upon people disagreeing and having conversations with each other, the fact that your anti any other opinion mindset goes so far that you would end up cutting people off just for being friends with people that you don't like frankly bothers me. To put it short, Omnia, you have absolutely every right to give into a frankly toxic, if you aren't with me then you're my enemy mindset, as you have every right to indulge yourself in a circle of people who don't challenge a single thing that you say or do in that circle that the message mentioned. But if you were the type of person who built a preconceived narrative about me being friends with you just to take advantage of you, outright ignore the purpose of something I did in order to twist it into something that it just isn't, then I have one thing left to ask of you. Do me a favor and never let me see you again. After how much I valued you as a friend for the way that you had provided me with a circle that accepted me when I felt like the world was out to get me, and then tossed me away as soon as I tried to do the right thing for you as a friend and point out where I thought that you could learn and grow as a person, instead of burying my head in the sand for you, then the best thing that I think that you can do for the both of us is to stay out of my life for the foreseeable future.
Alright, I'm back. The line was pretty long, and they didn't even have the propane I like anyways.
Oh, thank God, you're back. Just finished up here either way.
Ready to wrap this up then?
Let's do it. I've had just about enough as it is, and I think we have just about run out of content now.
After going over all of this, a pattern became clear. Omnia seems to have quite the issue with the people who take a stance they don't like on almost anything. Situations involving them have been actively inhibited from being constructive conversations about something due to this tendency almost from the beginning. And that is why viewing situations regarding them with a more critical eye would appear to be a crucial thing we should do moving forward.
We aren't saying to go send any hatred towards them or anything like that, but given how things have been regarding them in the past, holding claims they make to more scrutiny than is often done in the community simply needs to be done at this point. While making mistakes in this community is not something that I am trying to hold against them to death, it certainly has passed the point that once is an event, twice is a coincidence, and 3 times is a pattern. And on that note, I suppose I'll go sulk back over to my own channel now. I'll see you later, and thanks for having me, Jar.
Thanks for coming on, Lin Lin, and to my subscribers, make sure to check out our channel, cause it will be linked down below. Also, get ready for my next video, because I'm going to be dealing with some very spicy allegations, and it's not going to be a fun time for me.